Michael Shanks.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to start where a number of my honourable friends have during this debate, talking about community facilities that are filling gaps where the government is failing. A few weeks ago, I visited a fantastic community resource in Burnbank in Hamilton, in my constituency, which is providing emergency food parcels, but also doing a lot to support people back into work through things like improving IT skills so people can improve their CVs. Far from the image that the government might like to give about people not in work, they're doing everything they can to find employment. And it was the least the government could have done last week to try and meet them halfway. There are a number of things in the autumn statement that I do support. Increasing the minimum wage, however, it's been rebranded as welcome, although it hasn't kept pace with the real living wage, which means for many of the lowest earners, their costs are still not keeping up with wages. I welcome the commitment to uprate benefits by the September rate of CPI, although since that's the convention anyway, I'm not sure the Chancellor deserves any applause for that. But the reality is that a year on from the ill-fated mini-budget, we've got a government engaged in smoke and mirrors, giving out a pre-election frenzy with what they've already taken away tenfold before. A government that claims to improve living standards, while the OBR finds the complete opposite, the largest reduction in living standards since records began in the 1950s. And perhaps most damaging of all, the rates of poverty and destitution in the UK are forecast to go up, not down. That in itself is a damning indictment on any government, and one that I confess I struggle to comprehend. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation revealed staggering figures of destitution. 3.8 million people experienced destitution last year, more than double the figure in the last 5 years. And most shamefully of all, that figure includes 1 million children. The social security system, our great collective invention to provide the cradle-to-grave support that people need when they need it most, isn't touching the sides of this crisis. 72% of those destitute were in receipt of benefits. And one group most affected are those with a disability and chronic health problem. Some 63% of people experiencing destitution fit into that category. And it's that group that I'm going to focus my remarks on, and I'll draw the House's attention to my register of interests. I'm the trustee of 2 charities working with people with disabilities. Alongside the failure to provide the kind of boost to living standards that would have made a real difference, the Chancellor also sought to use his autumn statement to demonise those with long-term conditions who rely on benefits. On work capability assessments, the removal of the mobility descriptor will mean that those with severe mobility issues will be placed in the limited capability for work group, which means they will receive less support every month and are expected to prepare for work that they simply might not be able to do. Now, disabled people obviously have enormous potential, and like many of my honourable friends have said earlier, I don't think anyone would suggest that if people are able to get into work, they shouldn't be given the support to do so. But the key is to understand the support that those people need. The MS Society recently highlighted the issues of workplaces not providing the reasonable adjustments necessary to provide flexible working. And I spoke to a person recently in my constituency who has very severe epilepsy, resistant to most epilepsy medication. His seizure, if he has a seizure, he requires emergency medication, and for a number of days afterwards he's completely exhausted. For people like this with neurological conditions, it's not a uniform pattern of health issues. It changes day to day, week to week, and it's important that the holistic support provided to people to get into work reflects this. Much of what the Chancellor said seems to be predicated on the assumption that the world of work has changed since the pandemic, that everybody is somehow now able to work from home. But I'd be curious what evidence the Chancellor has to base this on. What proportion of job vacancies in the market at the moment are listed as home-based? What proportion have flexible working arrangements? Disabled people predominantly occupy lower-paid jobs. And it's also true, as a number of colleagues have said today, that the proportion of vacancies for home working tend to be in the higher pay band and higher qualified sectors. What is clear is that the Chancellor's lack of understanding of disabled people's real lived experience means this patronising side note in the autumn statement will do real damage. Charities have lined up to criticise it as stigmatising, the assumption that yet again disabled people don't want to work and are somehow a drain on our economy. One of my constituents who has spina bifida and who does fantastic work on integration with refugee communities in Glasgow has had cuts to her benefits and to her care package, which means she might not be able to continue in work anymore. And she put it very well. She feels like a cost, a negative on a balance sheet, not a person with abilities and aims in life. We need to reframe this whole conversation. So it's important, I think, when we look at the autumn statement, that in the round we look at these specific measures that are not doing anywhere near enough to lift people out of poverty, but for a particular group of people who are most likely to experience destitution, it won't only make their lives better, it will actively make their lives more difficult, and that should never be the aim of a government, and I hope it will lead to a rethink on some of the specific measures outlined last week.
Well done.